His name was Toyotomi Hideyoshi, and he was born with no family name at all, the son of a peasant foot soldier. By the end of his life, he ruled the entire country. He rose from carrying another man's sandals to commanding armies, avenged his own lord's assassination in 11 days, and reunified Japan for the first time in over a century. Then, in his final years, that same man forced his own nephew and chosen heir to die by the blade, and had the young man's wives, concubines, and small children, more than 30 people in all, executed together on a riverbank in Kyoto. This is the story of the greatest rise in Japanese history and what it cost the people around him. To understand how far he climbed, start at the bottom. He was born in 1537 in the village of Nakamura, in Owari Province, to a peasant family with no surname to pass down. His father is believed to have served as a low-ranking foot soldier before dying while Hideyoshi was still a child. By his late teens, he had left home and drifted through a string of minor jobs before entering the service of a rising local lord, Oda Nobunaga. Popular legend later claimed that as a young attendant, he once slept outside his lord's door with Nobunaga's sandals tucked inside his robe so they would be warm on a cold morning. It is a beloved story. It is also almost certainly a later embellishment. There is no contemporary record of it. What is documented is plainer and, in its own way, just as remarkable. A servant with no family name who made himself useful in ways no one else bothered to, and who Nobunaga began promoting again and again on results alone. Nobunaga is said to have nicknamed him Kozaru, the monkey, for his quick movements and unusual looks. Within Nobunaga's army, the name stuck less as an insult than as a kind of rough affection. By his 40s, the peasant son who once had no surname was commanding entire armies, managing sieges, and negotiating on Nobunaga's behalf, one of the most capable generals serving the most powerful warlord in Japan. In June 1582, Hideyoshi was laying siege to Takamatsu Castle in western Japan, flooding the fortress by damming a nearby river, when a message reached his camp that changed everything. Nobunaga was dead. One of his own generals, Akechi Mitsuhide, had cornered him at a temple in Kyoto called Honnoji and forced him to take his own life. Hideyoshi told almost no one. He quietly struck a peace deal with the enemy commander he had been besieging, then turned his entire army around and marched it roughly 230 kilometers back toward Kyoto in a matter of days. A forced march later, generations would call the Great Return from Chugoku. On July 2nd, 11 days after Nobunaga's death, Hideyoshi's army met Mitsuhide's forces at Yamazaki and crushed them. Mitsuhide fled the battlefield and was killed within days, reportedly by local farmers, while trying to escape. Hideyoshi had not been Nobunaga's most senior general, nor an obvious heir to anything. But he had moved faster than anyone else in Japan, and in the chaos after a warlord's assassination, speed mattered more than seniority. Within a year, he had outmaneuvered Nobunaga's other generals at Shizugatake. A year later, he fought Tokugawa Ieyasu to a standstill and outnegotiated him into submission. One by one, the men who might have challenged him chose to serve him instead. By 1585, Hideyoshi controlled more of Japan than any single man in over a century. But one title was close to him by birth, Shogun, reserved by tradition for descendants of the ancient Minamoto clan. A farmer's son did not qualify, whatever he had accomplished. So he took a different path to the top. He arranged his own adoption into a noble Kyoto family and had himself named Kampaku, Imperial Regent, the highest civil office in the land, one no commoner had ever held. The following year, the emperor granted him an entirely new surname, one built for the occasion, Toyotomi. In 1587, he staged the Kitano Grand Tea Ceremony, a vast public gathering that invited samurai and commoners alike to drink tea side by side on the grounds of a Kyoto shrine, a display of authority from a man who, a generation earlier, would not have been allowed near a tea room at all. A year later, came a very different kind of statement. His 1588 sword hunt edict ordered peasants across Japan to surrender their weapons, officially to fund a great Buddha statue, but in practice to permanently disarm the class he had been born into. The line between samurai and farmer hardened into law, closing behind him the very door he had once climbed through. In 1590, his armies surrounded the last independent power in Japan, the Hojo clan at Odawara Castle. After months of siege, the Hojo surrendered. For the first time in over 100 years, one man ruled the whole of Japan. Power secured, Hideyoshi faced a problem no ability could solve. He had no heir. In 1591, after his only son died as a toddler, he adopted his nephew, Hidetsugu, passed him the title of Kampaku, and took for himself the title of Taikō, a retired regent still very much in command. Then, in 1593, everything changed again. A concubine named Yododono gave him a second son, Hideyori. Hideyoshi now had a biological heir, and Hidetsugu, once the solution, had become a rival. In 1595, Hideyoshi accused his own nephew of plotting rebellion. The evidence was thin, but it did not need to be strong. Hidetsugu was stripped of his title and ordered to commit seppuku at a monastery on Mount Koya. He was 27 years old. It did not end there. Days later, Hidetsugu's wives, concubines, and young children, more than 30 people in total, were brought to the Sanjo riverbank in Kyoto and executed in public, then buried together in a single mound. It remains one of the best documented atrocities of the Sengoku period. Around the same years, Hideyoshi turned his ambitions outward. In 1592 and again in 1597, he launched enormous invasions of Korea, intending to use it as a corridor to conquer Ming China. Japanese forces won early victories, then bogged down for years against Korean resistance, Korean naval power, and Chinese reinforcements. The campaigns killed hundreds of thousands of soldiers and civilians and gained not 1 square kilometer of lasting territory. A mound in Kyoto built from ears and noses taken as proof of enemy dead still stands as a record of the cost. Hideyoshi died in September 1598 at his castle in Fushimi at the age of 61. His war in Korea was still unfinished. His armies withdrew only after his death reached them. He left behind a 5-year-old son, Hideyori, and a system built to protect him, 5 senior lords, sworn to govern jointly until the boy came of age. One of them was Tokugawa Ieyasu, whose own rise and betrayal of that arrangement this channel has already told. If you have seen Shogun, this should look familiar. A great ruler, already dead when the story begins. A council of regents who do not trust one another. A small child heir every faction claims to be protecting. That is not invention. It is almost exactly what Hideyoshi left behind in 1598. Within 2 years, the 5 regents were at war with each other. Ieyasu crushed his rivals at Sekigahara and became shogun in 1603, the title Hideyoshi himself could never legally hold. 15 years after Hideyoshi's death, Ieyasu's armies finally destroyed Osaka Castle and everyone inside it, including Hideyori, ending the Toyotomi line for good. There is a real symmetry to Hideyoshi's life. He spent his career breaking the rule that a man's birth should decide his ceiling. In his final years, as the most powerful man Japan had ever produced, he used that same ruthless will to guarantee his son's future, and instead helped destroy it, along with dozens of people who had done nothing but belong to the wrong family at the wrong time. No one climbs from nothing to ruling a country by accident. Toyotomi Hideyoshi proved that. He also proved that the skills needed to seize power are not the skills needed to hand it on safely, and that the second failure can undo the first. If this story was worth your time, subscribe. Forgotten Japan tells the stories that the famous tales of samurai and shoguns leave out.